no change to the DACA program and Dreamers for now, but I am definitely concerned about the memo and the reports that are out today. Look, this effectively makes local law enforcement agents, empowers them to be immigration, custom and border enforcement agents. It's dangerous. This is a policy that is totally expanded, and instead of, targeting individuals that actually had done harm to people and who one could argue should be deported. This just casts such a wide net, and folks are deporting dads and moms and sisters and brothers. This is just not a humane immigration policy.
Kayleigh, the Press Secretary Sean Spicer wouldn't call these efforts mass deportation, but according to the guidelines, 1 million people could go. How would you define it?
Well, 1 million people, if 1 million people go, that would be great, because there are 1 million people who have criminal records apart from just being here illegally. I think we can all agree that we want people with violent records out of this country. So if that happened, that is a good thing. And I would argue, along with Sean Spicer, that if you have a problem with the Immigration and Nationality Act, if you think it's somehow xenophobic, that is to say the act that says that if you are here, you are here illegally if you don't go through the visa process. If you have a problem with that, we do have Congress. We have a means to pass a new law, but let's enforce the laws on the books, because laws, when they are passed, should mean something and should be enforced.
Let's hear from a dreamer now. Her name is Grisha Martinez. She was brought to the U.S. from Mexico as a child.
We're concerned about what Donald Trump means for our family. Will it mean that we will be separated from our mother, just like we were separated from our father 9 years ago?
This is going to be a big problem for the president, this steady stream of stories. Frightened families if the Dreamer children are allowed to stay, but their parents face deportation, is it not? Bakari, can you hear me?
Yes, I think it's going to be a horrible problem for the president. I mean, I think what this young lady was talking about is the pain, is the angst, is the fear that's going to be heard throughout the country. One of the things that Kayleigh brought up is not all the way accurate. He is not just deporting individuals with criminal records or who committed violent crimes. In fact, this expands those individuals who will be deported and detained. This mass deportation policy that was put forth, it also incorporates people with status offenses and non-criminal records. And so when you look at this, you're actually taking away mothers and fathers and sisters and brothers, as Simone so eloquently said, who are actually working and contributing to society. And lastly, one of the things that shows you just the ineptitude of this White House, if you read the memo, is actually deporting all of these individuals, regardless of where they're from, back to the contiguous country from which they entered. So you're going to have Ecuadorians, Guatemalans, even Haitians who entered through Mexico being deported back to Mexico, and they're not even Mexican. So, I mean, I think that the confusion that this is going to cause is going to be paramount, but also the fear that these families are facing every day. I just don't think that's right, Don.
Paris, is leaving President Barack Obama's DACA program in place an olive branch?
I think what leaving DACA in place is just proof positive that this situation, this issue, is a difficult one. You can go from campaigning and then you have to move into governing. And just like you had Governor Brewer on the program earlier talking about the difficulties and how she was opposed to Obamacare, but when it came down to Medicaid expansion, she did what she felt that she needed to do for her citizens of the state of Arizona, which I am originally from. And so as the president moves into governing, I think you see this movement is one that is thoughtful, that is one that is being well thought out, because you can't just rush into this, but you have to do what he said he's going to do on the campaign trail. But it is a very difficult process. But I believe that this president understands that. He's married to someone who came to this country from Slovenia, and so I think he has an appreciation for immigration, but it has to be done legally. And what you see him trying to do is solve this issue of illegal immigration as it relates to those who commit crimes.
Bakari, hold that thought. You'll get the first word on the other side of the break. Back now with my panel, and I believe Bakari Sellers wanted to get in. Paris was saying that, the president has a wife who's an immigrant, and then you wanted to weigh in.
Yeah, I just think we have to get away from these simplistic arguments that because Donald Trump's wife is an immigrant, all of a sudden he's going to be knowledgeable or compassionate when it comes to immigration reform, or because Donald Trump's daughter is a converted Jew, that all of a sudden He doesn't have to be forceful in his denunciation of anti-Semitism. I mean, it's the same argument that people make because I have 5 black friends that, I can say things that are somewhat crude. So I think we need to move away from that. And what we want to see, what Donald Trump should do, and what I hope that he will do, is work with some of the members of the United States Senate and build comprehensive immigration reform. So these individuals who do not have criminal records, we all agree. I agree. I think all 4 of us agree. Kaylee, myself, Paris, Simone, we all agree that individuals who commit violent crimes need to be deported. But these fathers and mothers who are working diligently, who only have small status offenses, who have no criminal records, why not create a pathway to citizenship for those individuals who are already contributing to our society?
But Kari, those aren't simplistic arguments. The problem is, the left, liberal commentators like yourself are trying to sow false narratives that Donald Trump, for instance, is anti-Semitic. It is a logical flaw to your argument, a fatal flaw, in fact, I would argue, that his own family is, in fact, Jewish. You are trying to make a case, not you in particular, but other liberal commentators are making the case that he despises people of this faith. Well, if he despises people of this faith, it is in fact a flaw, a fatal flaw to your argument that he has grandchildren that are Jewish, that he has family that are Jewish, that he welcomed a son-in-law into his family who was in fact Jewish.
We pivoted from this immigration discussion to this, so I'll just answer since you directed it at me. And I will say that the criticism of Donald Trump is not that he's anti-Semitic. The criticism of Donald Trump is that he should forcefully denounce those who are anti-Semitic. And just as the same way that he renounces and he goes forcefully and says that radical Islamic terrorism is a threat to this country, the same way that he's able to use that verbiage, the same way he's able to go across the country and stomp in city after city, he also needs to be able to renounce other hate the same way and not be timid about it. Listen, Donald Trump has the opportunity here to actually bring this country together, but he's afraid of greatness. And if he wants to be timid, then so be it. But we want a leader who's going to stand up and say, hate is not allowed here, point blank, period. And those people, even if you support me, please stop doing this and making my Jewish friends, brothers and sisters, tearing up their cemeteries. Why can't he just say that?
This isn't about and I'm still waiting for the applause from the left. He did exactly what you wanted today. He did exactly what you wanted Wednesday. Liberals don't want to hear it. He said what you wanted him to say Wednesday. He said it today, but he can't win with the left.
Donald Trump today said that anti-Semitism is going to stop. Hate is bad. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about showing a level of empathy. If you can't get the empathy, at least sympathy, and being a leader who wants to bring people together by being forceful. The same way that he talks about Muslims who commit terroristic acts, I want him to talk about the bigots in this country who are wreaking terror and havoc on these vulnerable communities. That's all I'm asking. I don't think Donald Trump's an anti-Semite. I don't think he's a racist, but I do want him to stand up to those who are. He has an awesome opportunity to be a unifier and bring this country together. He needs to stop being scared and do it.
John, real quick, I appreciate Bakari saying for the viewers that he does not think that President Trump is anti-Semitic or a racist, because there are a lot of liberals that carry out that narrative and have said that. And just to his point, the president was very clear today, and I bring this up because he did say it with his own mouth. He said, we have to fight bigotry, intolerance, and hatred in all of its very ugly forms. The anti-Semitic threats targeting our Jewish community and community centers are horrible and are painful and a very sad reminder of all of the work that still must be done to root out hate and prejudice and evil. I don't know what more he could have said that make it so clear that he is against anti-Semitism and he wants to do something about it. That was a clear statement from the president at the African American Museum.
I think he needs to be consistent is what we're talking about. And it's not just the president, because the president does need to use his platform and his mouth and his Twitter fingers, as I've said on this program multiple times, to denounce hate in all of its forms. But it's also the policies. I mean, we can look at this immigration policy and this policy today that again opens the door to mass deportations, that is not humane, that does target people, that does open up the door for local law enforcement officials to profile individuals because of what they look like. So it is more than just one speech at the African American Museum of History and Culture. It's more than one speech. It's to be consistent in his acts and his rhetoric everywhere he goes, and to make sure that permeates throughout his administration. And Donald Trump has not done that. He has not made people in this country that look different feel safe.
I've got to get to the break, but my question is, and you guys are having a great conversation, I didn't want to jump in here, is how did we go from a failure of some sorts to denounce anti-Semitism to being an anti-Semite? I haven't heard anyone called the president anti-Semitic, and maybe you guys have. But
I have not. I heard the president put that on himself.
It doesn't mean that. I mean, they're not mutually exclusive. People can question why he didn't denounce anti-Semitism sooner and still not believe that he's an anti-Semite. We'll discuss that on the other side of the break. So I want to get back to my panel now. And Kaylee and I were talking, and I was on the treadmill when you were. I think you were on Aaron, and I think it was Steve Goldstein from the Anne Frank Center who said he actually believed that the president was anti-Semitic. Right? I haven't heard any liberal commentators. I haven't heard any members of Congress or lawmakers. It was interesting to say. And Alan Dershowitz came on and said this guy was hyperbolic. I think Fareed Zakaria said the same thing and should be more careful with his language.
Yeah, I completely agree. But at the same time, I think you have to consider why some on the left are pushing so hard this, what I consider a false or completely overblown story of Donald Trump not condemning anti-Semitism. Mm-hmm. The implication is, well, he didn't condemn it because perhaps he empathizes with those views. Maybe they're more subtle in the way they put forward their point than was Steve Goldstein, but it's the same motive, which is to paint Donald Trump as something he is not and demonize him.
So, Bakari, but I have heard people say, I haven't heard anyone say that they believe Donald Trump is an anti-Semite when it comes to lawmakers. They think that that he doesn't want to alienate the part of his base who may have issues when it comes to that.
That's true, but I can answer Kaylee's question, and she wonders why people are hypothesizing and why people are bringing up the fact that he's been lackluster, slow, moving very, very slow on his feet and denouncing these acts of violence. He hasn't even really forcefully come out and talked about the Muslims who were slaughtered in their own mosque in Quebec. The reason being is because people are afraid. My grandmother, who just passed away last week, she used to always say that you can't fall off the floor. And when you think about that theory, there are a lot of people right now. They're transgender students. They're African Americans who want criminal justice reform. They're Jews who are being faced with anti-Semitism. They're Muslims who are being persecuted throughout the country with these rise in Islamophobic attacks. There are a lot of people who are afraid, Kaylee, and that's the reason why. And if Donald Trump wants to kind of soothe that fear, then Donald Trump needs to be a leader. Being a leader means you speak forcefully out, not just against those things that appease your base, but those things that make us all American.
But the same could be said for President Obama, by the way. There were a lot of us wondering.
He's not the president of the United States.
He was, and there were a lot of us wondering why he wasn't speaking out when police ambushes were up 167%.
Oh my goodness,
so
that's not fair.
true.
We have to stop.
That's also not true.
That is not true, Kaylee. President Obama forcefully spoke up and said we need to support our law enforcement. But the problem here is that I want to go back to Donald Trump's press conference from last week. And when he was asked specifically about these Jewish centers that have been targeted, he answered the question saying, I'm the least anti-Semitic person out there. I'm the least racist person out there. And that goes to show that he seems, I don't know, but it seems as though that he does not grasp the full concept of what it means to separate from being anti-Semitic and just denouncing anti-Semitism. So that is why I think you see some folks, not anyone here on this panel, questioning where Donald Trump's loyalties lie here. But again, this would all be cleared up if he would just be forceful and consistent.
I have less than a minute left.
And I just think that he did that today. Well, you can go back to last week, or you can talk about what he did today on the birthday of Congressman Lewis's birthday at the African American Museum. He forcefully denounced it, like he did during the campaign.
Paris, how do you answer the question that people are saying? She's saying consistency, but why did it take so long?
You know, I think you have to determine whether or not you think this took a long time, or whether or not his statement at the press conference was good enough. A lot of people didn't like that statement. Some people today said, well, he had to read it, and so it didn't come from his heart. You know, I think this president is damned if he does, damned if he doesn't. And so at some point, we just have to accept the fact that he's president, accept the things that he says, and understand that he means what he says, and he says what he means.
I refuse to accept that the bar is this low.
I've got to go. Thank you all. Don't miss it.